Good morning and good afternoon. It is Friday, June 5th, and you are on The Take. My name is Todd Hirsch. I am one of the co-hosts of The Take, and joining me on The Take this morning is what I like to believe is my regular co-host, Gitane De Silva. I think she's going to come up any minute now. She might be having just a bit of a technical problem, but thank you for joining us on The Take. This is our weekly LinkedIn Live program. There she is.
I'm back.
Welcome back to The Take.
Thanks, Todd. Great to see you.
It's been a few weeks. It's been a hot minute since you were on The Take with me. You've been a very busy person over the last several weeks. Gitane and I are both professional speakers, so we both know what it's like being on the road. Gitane, you've been doing a lot of keynoting across the country. But before we get into the big issues, the big economic and geopolitical issues of the week, there is some really important news that we want to share. Gitane, why don't you share your new appointment with the world? This was, I think, yesterday announced.
That's right. So thanks, Todd. Yeah, just yesterday it was announced I will be the inaugural executive director of the Peter Lougheed School for Politics and Democracy at the University of Alberta. So I take up that position on July the 1st, and I'm super excited. I think it's a really exciting opportunity at an important moment in Canada's democracy. So really looking forward to joining the U of A and working with the students and faculty there. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
Well, the U of A landed a fantastic catch with you in that role. I can't think of a better person because of your knowledge and experience in all things political and around democracy. And maybe especially right now in the world, we need to be talking about politics and democracy. So congratulations on that. Now, I know we're both from Edmonton. You did not attend the U of A. I'm a U of A alum. But great for the University of Alberta to be bringing you in on that role.
Well, I'm excited to join the green and gold. So
yeah. Here in Calgary, well, the green and gold, there's a lot of U of A alum here in Calgary. So the green and gold, I think, plays pretty well. And there's actually the University of Alberta alumni does a lot of events here in Calgary, which I've been happy to attend. So maybe you'll be part of some of those in the future.
I look forward to it. It's going to be great.
Yeah. All right, we've had a big week in economic news as always. So let's get into the weeds. The first topic, Gitane, we want to talk about, and I might have more to say on this than you because I'm more on that economic side. But we had data out this week from Statistics Canada that indicates Canada is in a technical recession. Now, a lot of viewers will know that Statistics Canada's definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of contraction in the GDP. And we found out this week that not only was Q4 of 2025 a contraction, but we had a very, very modest contraction in Q1 of 26, thereby meeting that technical definition. Now, of course, politicians have been making a lot of making a lot of hay about this. What do you think, Gitane? Is this politics or is this economics?
Well, great question. And a question I actually had for you. I remember reading something, but now I don't remember the details because it has been a big week, about if you took the price of gasoline out, like how much. I think that part of the conversation on whether this is in fact really a technical recession. I mean, we've certainly seen some extraordinary geopolitical events that have increased the cost of life as well. So,
yeah.
I think there is definitely a lot of politics involved. It's an opportunity for the opposition to attack the federal government, the governing Liberals, in terms of how they're dealing with all the things, including the current trade talks with the United States and tariffs and all that. But, I'd be curious on your thoughts. How much is the war in Iran impacting these statistics?
Well, it's so interesting because that first quarter of 2026, it was just a very, very modest contraction, still a contraction, but very, very modest. A couple of things. Statistics like this tend to get revised, and they can go either way. It could get revised down, an even larger contraction, or it could just as easily show that it was in fact a small expansion. So when it's just sort of razor thin, I never like to put too much focus or emphasis on that, because revisions could show that in fact it was an expansion. But the other really interesting thing, and the Prime Minister has been trying to make this point, is that a lot of the contraction that we've seen is because Canada's population is actually slipping. It's actually lower. And that is because a lot of those international students have returned home, a lot of the temporary foreign workers, after that huge swell of in-migration we saw in 23 and 24. And now it's correcting itself. A lot of those students have left. Canada's population is actually contracting a little bit. So GDP per capita is still actually increasing. So back in 2025, Pierre Poilievre and the opposition and everyone who doesn't like the Prime Minister said, GDP per capita is actually contracting, and it was. But now GDP per capita, it's the question of the math, the denominator, the population, if it's falling, GDP per capita is actually rising. So all of this is to say, I don't know if we should make too much of the R word. People tend to get alarmed when they hear, we're in recession. I think we need more data. And today's data, I don't know if you saw this, Gitane, but labor force numbers out this morning for the month of May, an astounding increase in employment across Canada, 87,000 jobs, all of them full-time, all of them in the private sector. This is exactly the kind of labor report or labor market report that economists love to see, and the government likes to see. So who knows? I don't think we're in a recession, or at least I don't think we should be making too much of a big deal of it until we have more data.
What is that expression? Statistics, lies and statistics, or something? All depends on how you interpret the math, I guess.
Well, I was at a lunch yesterday, and the quote I heard was, "I can tolerate lying, but inaccuracies I will not put up with."
I love it.
Yeah. All right. The second topic that I want to get into, and this, I think, I want to hear a little bit more of what you have to say. Every week we've been talking about the CUSMA review, the trade renegotiations or review with the United States and Mexico. But there was some big talk this week from the President of the United States. What did he tell us, and what does that indicate where these CUSMA talks are going to go?
Well, he started referring to us as the 51st state again. So that's usually an indicator that he's trying to upset us or rile us up to get us to concede to something that he's looking for. He's also looking to hit Canada and a number of other countries with that 10% tariffs, claiming that we allow the import of goods that are made with forced labor. So Canada's on the long list of countries there being potentially set with that. But what's important to note there is anything that's protected under the CUSMA, this 10% would not apply to that. So I think it just demonstrates again how important the CUSMA agreement is to Canada and our economy. We had Minister LeBlanc and the lead negotiator in Washington this week in an effort to try and get things moving as we get closer to this July 1st deadline by which the parties have to indicate their intentions with the CUSMA. So we saw this week that both Canada and Mexico said they would like to renew the agreement for another 16 years. So the CUSMA is pretty unique. Normally, when you have a free trade agreement, it is a set and forget type of scenario. You just sign it and you agree to continue on until there's a problem of some kind. But the CUSMA has both a sunset clause, so that came into effect in 2020, expires in 2036. And it also has this mandatory review at the 6-year mark. So now we're getting a sense, we knew sort of where Canada and Mexico were at, or waiting for the US to declare its position, and I suspect they'll be looking for some amendments. So hopefully, I think part of what Canada's trying to do is smoke out the US to make public the actual changes they'd like to see.
So I know we've talked about this before, and other guests that we've had on the take. I've asked them this. Gitane, where do you think, where is this going to go? Should Canadians be concerned about this? Are we going to be able to skate through this? Will it just depend on what mood the president is in on that specific day? What can we expect?
Well, I think we have already gotten more comfortable with uncertainty, but I think we need to continue to be comfortable with uncertainty. I don't think we will see the United States agree to. So when this review happens, there's three choices. You can withdraw, you can say you love it and you want to extend it for another 16 years, or you can ask for amendments. And if the three parties can't agree, then we have to undergo this review every single year until we reach agreement. And we know that the president loves unpredictability. We know that he thinks that this gives him power in a negotiation. We also know that there is the US midterm elections in November, and the president's approval ratings are not as high as he might like, and the Republicans are suffering as a result. So I think it's unlikely that he would pick the withdrawal option before those midterms in November. So we need to get used to, comfortable, accept that this uncertainty is going to continue for a while. We also need to accept that the president really deeply loves tariffs. And so it's also not necessarily like he really loves them, loves them. And so it's not necessarily a bad thing that we're wagging the puck, right? The agreement we have is the best agreement out there right now. And we know that whatever comes next will likely see higher tariffs. So we are in no rush unless you are impacted by these other tariffs, right? The Section 232, those impacts on auto, steel, and aluminum, those impacts are very real. But in Alberta and in Western Canada, we are less impacted by those, just given the nature of the goods that we export. You know, oil, energy is exempt. For example, uranium, potash are exempt. Obviously, lumber is hit hard, but I think we just have to accept that this is going to take a while and it's not going to be resolved tomorrow. I don't know. What do you think, Todd?
Well, what is the deadline? July 1?
July 1. We have to
July
declare.
1. You know, it might work in Canada's favor that the White House is a little busy right now. They've got a lot of things on the go, not least of all this ongoing conflict in the Middle East, but also as you mentioned, the midterms, which are sort of just around the corner. You know, this all might work in Canada's favor because it just seems to be an administration that is easily distracted by things. You know, what is the issue of the day that they're commenting on? So it might, you know, when you use that hockey metaphor, ragging the puck, it might actually make that a little bit easier for Canada. I've always said in my presentations, I think that we should anticipate the worst and hopefully end up with something better. And that isn't just pessimism. I think that's realism. As you said, the president loves tariffs. He's always said this. We shouldn't be surprised by any of it. His strategy is confusion. It's like the Tasmanian devil, just creating chaos everywhere you go. And as far as strategies go, it's an effective strategy because, you know, business leaders and politicians and ordinary Canadians have been confused and in some ways, you know, we're on our back foot with this confusion. So I don't know. I also don't know how it's going to go. But another aspect of this, not so much related to trade with the United States, but Canada's effort to diversify our trade, which is all related to this, is the announcement this week of the LNG Canada potentially entering into an agreement with Germany to export LNG off Canada's west coast. Up to 1 million metric tons of natural gas a year. Gitane, maybe break this down for the audience a little bit. Is this really great news? Is this even going to happen? And how does this help situate Canada?
Well, it is a big deal. You may recall that right after the war in Ukraine broke out, the German chancellor came to Canada, and then Prime Minister said there was no business case for Canada to export natural gas to Europe. So this is a real change in position and in tone. Of course, you know, exporting natural gas off of Canada's west coast all the way to Germany is probably the longest way to get there. But we know that like many commodities, these are fungible. So likely what had happened is, you know, there would be some sort of swap along the way where Germany would sell that to another country and buy from
in Asia, else. I understand. Yeah. It all goes into the Asian market.
And goes into the Asian market, yeah. But regardless, it's an important signal that Canada is serious about diversifying our export markets, serious about our ambitions of becoming an energy superpower. You know, the messaging was very clear that Canada has what the world wants, and we need to answer that call, which is a very different change in tone. Really important that this project is in partnership. So one of the equity owners is a First Nation, Winishka, right, which is really important to demonstrate that we are meaningfully pursuing economic reconciliation and doing things in partnership. I think that's really huge. I mean, I think too, with all things, like the key is this investment hasn't yet reached FID, that final investment decision. But we see this as well as things, and like, you'll recall the government's investments in EV battery manufacturing in Ontario, right? So this is in part show, right, to demonstrate that we're serious and to bring new partners on board, but also I think really meaningful in terms of demonstrating these various orders of government coming together to try and get this project moving. So I, for one, am really excited about it and excited about the potential that it demonstrates that we actually do want to do. We want to do business with different parts of the world, and we want to actually build things quickly, because there's also a pretty ambitious construction timeline to actually get this natural gas moving.
Well, and I think it's a great example of two G7 kind of allied countries, Germany and Canada, both finding themselves on their back foot. Germany, because a lot of their supply was coming from Russia, which is now no longer a reliable supplier. Canada, of course, looking to diversify our exports because the United States is no longer as reliable a trading partner. So both countries scrambling a little bit to try to diversify both their export market and their supplier. And hopefully this ticks a lot of boxes. Now, how long would this take? I mean, even best case scenario, because it's just an agreement to move forward with it, right? As you said, there's no contract in place. There haven't been, nothing has even started on this project. Best case scenario, Gitane, how long would it take until molecules of natural gas are moving out of this port?
Well, it is an agreement in principle, right? And as you would know from the deal side, that's really important to get the financing together and actually get to that final investment decision. But they're talking for 2030. So it's not a huge amount of time.
Okay.
Right?
So not
because you
years.
then also need to build, there's pipeline infrastructure required to move the gas. And, it's also a win-win for Alberta. 60% of the gas that could flow to that
right.
facility
Well,
is
if it's 2030. I'm actually really pleased with that, because these things tend to, maybe it's oil pipelines that take longer to build and facilities around that. But if they can get this up and going in 3.5 years, I think that's actually pretty good.
It's different because it's a floating facility too, right? This is not,
okay.
It's different than LNG Canada. It's actually like basically a big ship that they would put off the coast. So that construction is different and very modular, and so that can move things along. And the BC government, interestingly, BC takes a lot of flack for its approach to major resource projects, but they actually have an office similar to the Federal Major Projects Office, where they've got a list of projects that have the greatest potential to have the greatest positive impact on the economy. And this is on the list, and then they work as a government to make sure that that project review gets expedited. So all of the pieces on the BC regulatory side are in place or moving forward already, which I think is really crucial.
I should pause at this moment just to let any listener know, if you've got comments or if you have a question, type that into the chat. We love comments and questions. And so type those in, and Peter, who operates everything behind the scenes, will put that up for us. Anything else you want to mention about the CUSMA, about trade diversification before we move on to the last topic, Gitane?
Well, I think it's interesting, the U.S. administration keeps highlighting the fact that they've moved forward with Mexico already. They've had this series of conversations with Mexico, and I think it's been really interesting for me, and I'd be curious your thoughts on watching Canada's strategy evolve. Initially we retaliated, and then we tried some concessions, and now it appears we're holding firm. And, whereas Mexico has just really decided to kind of remain quiet and I think kind of try to stay below the radar. And so I'll be curious now that I think, Canada really is holding firm, understanding what we're bringing to the table in terms of the importance of our energy sector, critical minerals, potash, uranium, a whole variety of things, where we actually can get to yes and where the U.S. pushes. I'll be curious if this strategy actually results in the U.S. revealing its hand a little bit more, making some concrete requests. But what are you thinking?
Well, it's interesting because when you mentioned Mexico, because last week, I don't know if you saw the episode, I know you were busy, but last week I had Carlo Dade from the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary, another one of the sharpest people I know. I get all the smart people as co-hosts on this show. It's incredible. But Carlo, he had written a piece in Substack talking about Mexico, Canada, the United States, and China. and how China is really kind of complicating the trilateral agreements between the three countries. Back in the 90s, when Mexico joined NAFTA, it was not as complex. But now China is playing sort of this counterweight. All three countries, Canada, Mexico, and US, we all have different interests and involvements with China that are complicating our issues here in North America in getting an agreement done. So he had some really interesting things to say about Mexico, their position, why they were able to sign with the United States sooner. And even though Canada and Mexico are aligned in a lot of ways, we're not aligned with respect to what we want out of China and how China and the United States are themselves interacting. So he had, if anyone wants to go back and read that Substack, you can just look for Carlo Dade in Substack, a really interesting read.
But no, it is very complicated. The world is a complicated place these days.
It is a complicated place. This is why we need smart people like you and Carlo to help break it down. Now, the last topic that I want to get into this week while we still have time is from the world of sports. And now I am way out of my element talking about sports. Anyone who's met me for 5 minutes knows I know nothing about sports. I barely knew you were ragging the puck reference. It had to do with hockey. But we got a big week coming up with the FIFA World Cup, which I understand is what we colloquially call soccer here in Canada. It's all getting going this week. I'm being a little bit silly, of course. I'm very aware of the FIFA World Cup. What do you think, Gitane? Is this worth, according to Canada's Parliamentary Budget Office, the estimates are $1 billion of tax money at all three levels of government in Canada for Toronto and Vancouver to be hosting, I think it's 13 games of the World Cup. Is this a good investment? Discuss.
Oh my goodness, what a tricky question. I mean, we do know, we do know that sporting events and other pop culture events can be huge economic drivers, right? You remember the Taylor Swift effect when she was on her world tour and how much money she was bringing in. And if I look at an event like the Calgary Stampede here in Alberta, it's hundreds of millions of dollars of economic activity that results. So I think it remains to be seen, or could it be like the Olympics, right? Where Montreal, I think, is still paying however many decades later. So it's a big question mark. And I think it's a question for people right now when life is expensive. Do they want governments spending money on sporting events, or would they rather have those tax dollars go to, I don't know, fill potholes or things?
Well, I mean, I say this as not really a sporting fan. I get the appeal to it, and I understand the excitement, especially for those who are right into football, I guess we should call it, or soccer. It's a big event. And I think this is big news for Canada to be hosting it for the first time. And Canada is actually in the competition. We're ranked, I think, 30th out of 64 teams. I forget what it is, but we're in there. We're going to be playing. Here's my take on it. I think when we look at these international sporting events, or even things like a G7, there was some criticism when Canada hosted the G7 last June, right around a year ago, how much money this cost. There's two things we have to remember. If you were never prepared to host one of these things, we shouldn't be expected to participate in it. I made this point when Calgary was debating, and we had that referendum question in 2019 about hosting the 2026 Olympics, which ultimately we did not host. But, people said it's a waste of money. One thing we have to keep in mind, Canada likes participating, especially the Winter Olympic Games. And if we want to participate, at some point, we're sort of obligated to host it. And that might cost some money. We can't expect every other country in the world to host it on their dime, and we participate and take the medals home. We at some point are obligated also to host. And I think the same case could be made with FIFA. The other case, as an economist, I like to make, when people think it's $1 billion of tax money, that $1 billion isn't just being lit on fire and disappears. That is $1 billion of government spending into those cities. It is infrastructure. It is hiring people, security, all sorts of jobs that are being created around it. Now, the question is, should that money, those public dollars, be better spent on something else? But when we think about $1 billion, we too often think about it just being, thrown into the wind and it's gone. That's not what's happening to it. And the G7 event, here in Kananaskis, Alberta last year, I saw directly that money being spent in southern Alberta, in companies in Calgary that were all of a sudden doing the best year ever because of this money. So there's those two aspects. We have to, at some point, take our turn hosting these events if we want to participate. And also, that money spent is not just being flushed down the toilet. It is being spent in those regions and those economies.
Yeah, I think too, the other thing to remember is that, when I say this as a former diplomat, you get a lot of people from other countries, businesses, people come to watch these games, like passionate soccer or football fans. And the number of deals that I have done or facilitated, or, the connections that are made while you're sitting watching a sporting event, that also needs to be considered when we talk about the economic benefit.
That's right.
Is those connections that are made and the deals that grow out of that.
And anyone who's been in business during the Calgary Stampede knows that's never really been my role, but there is a lot of business that takes place in between pints of beer at the Calgary Stampede. Mm-hmm. So there is also that business aspect to it. And, for Canada to be represented at the FIFA, a lot of those deals probably taking place over the next month or so, in between soccer matches, football matches, I guess we call them.
That's right. Football is life, Todd. Football is life. Come on.
Football is like the beautiful game. Isn't that what they call it?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe this year will be the year I get into the FIFA World Cup and actually watch it. But what do you got going this weekend before I let you go? Anything?
I'm going to beautiful Edmonton.
Edmonton, my hometown. Both our hometowns, right?
Yeah, it'll be fun going up for some family stuff. How about you?
Not too much. We've got some friends in town from Halifax who are originally from Calgary. They're back visiting, so we're going to have them over for some dinner tonight. And otherwise, the rest of the weekend, probably just doing a bit of gardening and relaxing.
If it's not raining.
If it's not raining, yeah. It's beautiful at the moment. But well, with that, we are at the bottom of the hour. Gitane, I want to thank you again. Great to have you back on the show. It's always interesting breaking these things down. Congratulations again on your appointment.
Thank you so much.
And as always, thank you to the fantastic Peter Clark in the background, who keeps us looking good and keeps everything running. And with that, check out Gitane's website and my website. If you need a keynote speaker, you know where to go. With that, we will sign off for this week. Have a great weekend, everyone, and see you next Friday on The Take.
Take care, everyone.